Hi, and welcome to a finance Q&A with two AST board members. I have to my left of me, Nigel, and to my right, Simon. I'm Akhil, I'm going to be your host, also a board member, and we're going to just talk about finances around Arsenal, the current situation, a look ahead to the summer with contract renewals, wages, potentially finishing outside the top four. And we're just going to try and explain a little bit about how we think things are going to happen and what it means to the club going forward. So, first question, where are Arsenal right now? In terms of revenue, season's kind of nearly over now. We know where we are, we know where we're going to finish roughly, we know we're in a cup final. What's the overall picture?
Yeah, well, for this financial year, this season, ending in May 2017, we're estimating that the club will earn revenues of close on £420 million, which is an increase on last year of about £70 million. A big increase. Nearly all of it driven from the new TV deal, the Premier League TV deal. We think there's going to be a locked-in profit of somewhere around the £40 million mark, possibly higher. Okay. And that largely comes from the fact that the TV deal has some cost controls on it, which means you can't spend all of your extra TV revenue on wages. You can only spend about £7 million of it a year on wages, and the rest of the money has to be retained and used either for transfer fees or basically locked in as profit. So the club is in extremely rude health financially. Okay. Record revenues and probably record profits, I think.
Okay. And I mean, comparing this season to last season we finished second. Yep. We were obviously in the Champions League group stages from the start. This year, potentially, we may finish fourth, we may finish fifth, we may finish sixth. We don't know yet. But what is the implication of finishing second and finishing fourth, and then what's the implication of finishing second and finishing fifth or sixth?
Yeah, well, go on.
The obvious easy answer is about the merit payments which you receive for every position in the Premier League. You receive £2 million in addition to the other television monies for equal distribution for the overseas money, and then facility payments for the number of times you appear on television. So in simple terms, the difference between finishing second last season and let's say sixth this season will be £10 million difference. But the big issue will be the difference between a season in the Champions League and a season in the Europa League. So in the season gone, 15-16, not the current season, Arsenal received something like just under £50 million from UEFA for their Champions League participation, which was a round of 16 knockout. Yeah. In addition to that, you get the gate receipts from your home games, and as Simon will explain, there's also payments you have to make which are related to being in the Champions League. So the three aspects of the Champions League payments are: one, the money from UEFA; secondly, the match receipts you're going to get from your home games, and thirdly, the additional costs of participating. Europa League does have money attached to it, of course. Liverpool in 15-16 went to the final. They received something like 30 million euros, so let's call that 25 million pounds for getting to the final in 15-16. So on a net basis, Simon, what would you estimate the real difference between a round of 16 finish in the Champions League and a semi-final in the Europa Cup would be?
Probably somewhere around 30 million euros, 25 million pounds, allowing for the money you save on the bonuses, the lower quality games that we'll have less A's and B's, more C's and B's, but we might have more of them.
How does that change if we go out the Europa League quite early? So we go out at the group stages. So presuming we don't get very far because we throw them, or for whatever reason. Well,
most of what we get from the Europa League comes about from the TV deal. It's a TV pool deal, and so Spurs and Liverpool, because only two, you share it amongst the UK teams that get through, and at most there'll be 3 teams, and there may only be 2 if United win the competition.
The difference between Liverpool getting to the final and losing, and Spurs going out
It's about 15 million euros, yeah.
So 12, 13 million pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but anyway, the point is it's still a reason. Yeah, it's a hit, but it's still a reasonable chunk of change that the club will get from being in the Europas. Not catastrophic, somewhere around say 25 million quid. Yeah. Park it there. Which, when you got 40 million pounds worth of profit this year, doesn't look that bad at all, does it? Really, you're still in profit theoretically at a simplistic level.
I mean, you mentioned about the being second and being sixth to be about 10 million if it's 2 million a year. I mean, I guess a lot of people would ask, what does 10 million get you? It's not that much, actually. Would it really impact Arsenal?
Well, first of all, that 10 million comes with no costs attached to it, so it's effectively free of any costs whatsoever. Arsenal are running a wage bill close to 200 million. In last season, it was 192. This season, it's going to be close to around 200, so that 10 million is 5% of that. If you put it also in terms of wages, which most people are familiar with, a player on £200,000 a week for a season is £10 million. So whilst there are controls over what you can actually take your wage bill to, and we might touch on that a little bit later, £10 million is one top-class player on £200,000 a week for one season.
And now just looking at the wider picture, so where Arsenal are in terms of the Premier League, in terms of that top level, Man United, Man City, Chelsea, and where they are maybe in the position Spurs, Liverpool, Everton, that kind of bracket. Firstly, which one are they in? And you know, and how do you see that going? Where's the competition? What's the competition? What's the difference in numbers there?
Well, the move to the new stadium was all about competitive advantage around gate receipts. That competitive advantage was there for a period of time, which slowly is being eroded, and for gate receipts, that is, as new stadiums come online, Liverpool have increased capacity, etc., etc. Broadcast money has gone up across the board. We have a very equal distribution amongst the 20 Premier League clubs. From top to bottom, everyone is receiving considerably more. So there's no competitive advantage really in the television money. The big issue is around commercial sponsorship. The two big sponsorships there are your shirt sponsor and your shirt manufacturer, and that's really where Arsenal's competitive advantage or disadvantage is beginning to hurt a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, effectively this season, well, next season is when you'll see the impact of it, because Chelsea have done a big new shirt deal, got a training kit deal, and they've got the Yokohama deal, which has kicked in. So over like this year and next year, Chelsea are looking to add probably around 60 million a year to their commercial revenues, which will take them up to the £180 million a year mark, which is like 60 million more than us at least. Takes them up to the same sort of level as Man City. Nowhere near Man United, who are on another 100 million more than that. 280 million just from commercial income. Man, you have over 150 million pounds a year more to spend on wages.
Where are they getting that from? Is it just the shirt sponsor, or is there extra? What else have they got that we haven't maybe got?
They've got all these global deals, which most other clubs actually struggle to get the depth of deals that they have. Yeah, we talk about our 30 partners. They have like Mr. Potato in Thailand and Ablo Diablo the wine, and it is on a level that we just no other Premier League club can get near to, and their revenue growth has slowed. It's true that I think the first quarter they were up only like 1%. Yeah. Okay, so maybe they're hitting something of a glass ceiling on it.
Very, very broadly, Arsenal's commercial revenue of 90 million a year.
Well, everyone adds in the shirts on top, so it's 120.
So 30 million from Puma a year, 30 million from Emirates, and then you've got the rest coming from a 25, 30 different partnerships. Yeah. At $1 million each.
Well, less than that. They're averaging like $500,000, half a bar each.
And this is where the other clubs really make the difference. So if Chelsea are getting 75 million a year from Adidas, it's substantial. And we're still locked into these deals for a couple more years. The Puma deal, I think next year is our last season with Puma, unless they extend. And we're still locked into the Emirates shirt sponsorship until 2019.
And you know, things like sort of moving forward, and this is a question we've certainly been asked recently about sort of separate deals for training kits, sleeve sponsors, all that's coming in that perhaps other clubs potentially are a little bit quicker than us off the mark, or I don't know, maybe we are quick.
People just hadn't really done it. I mean, Man U did it, and it depends what
training kit.
Yeah, the deal that you're into, because you got your mother deal, like your shirt deal, you got to like carve out. You've got to carve it out. Yeah. In Arsenal, it includes like everything. So
but it's fair to say, on renewal, we should have those branding opportunities.
Yeah, you've got the opportunity. It should be in the price that is reflective for that.
And just sort of focusing on Chelsea for a second, that they obviously bought their deal out to get a better deal. Is that something you can see happening a lot more? Is it the right thing? Is it good to have a long-term deal, a short-term deal?
I sort of chatted informally with some of the club people about this at the AGM, and there's a good argument both ways. Yeah, Chelsea took the view that locking in on a 10-year deal for substantially higher money, sort of 30-40 million pound a year more, was worth paying 60 million quid to get them out the old deal. But they're in it for 10 years. Now the price might keep going up and up and up. If you look at the way that the shirt deals have gone up, we had one of the second best deals, I think, at about 30, and now that's being like puffed again. But they're in for 10 years. It could be that in 3 years' time or 2 years' time, when we come round to do our deal, the benchmark annual rate
is 100.
But then they couldn't have.
What a top team.
But I mean, it's going to be.
But then they could buy them out again, potentially.
Well, yeah, but the trouble is they're locked in for 10 years, so they'd have to pay them 750 million to get out of that deal. That's a bit more than the 60 million that they've spent. They basically got from selling Obi Mikel and that other joker to China.
So back to Akhil's original question: which financial league are we in? Are we in with?
We're not in that league.
We're not with we're not with Chelsea, United, and Man City. We're in with Liverpool, Tottenham, and Everton.
Yes.
Financially.
Now, yes. I mean, the club will argue, oh well, we're closer to City on the gate money, but frankly, we're not there in terms of the TV. We're going to be out the Champs League next year. Those guys are going to be in it. They've got that 25 million there on top of what we're talking about on the sponsorships.
So if your financial competitive advantage has been eroded, what do you have to do with your 420 million of revenue a year to ensure you get back to that top table rather than the second table? Well, in terms of, or can you do more with what you've got?
Well, you've got to get more out of the players. I mean, the frustration was that with the much derided European fair play and the constraints it put on City and Chelsea, and it bit. And we had a couple of seasons, like last year and to some extent this year, where our wage bills were pretty comparable to City and Chelsea's. There wasn't a lot in it, and our spending power wasn't. They didn't buy many players. Chelsea added Kante, sold a couple off. We added like 100 million. So we've had the time where we've been at the table with them, and it's passed, and now that's gone. And so we're going to be back having to outperform relative to our peers, which is Liverpool, and closing. Tottenham are closing. There's still going to be a distance, but they're going to be closing fast, and they're doing better anyway off half the wage bill. So it's a tough competitive landscape.
Okay, so now moving on to sort of the wage bill in general. Where are we in that league? I mean, I think it's quite well documented, and it's been in the press a lot that we're pretty much doubling what Spurs pay. I don't know if that's true. You can tell me from what you know. Where are we compared to everyone else? I know you mentioned it a little bit there. And then how does things like TV money impact on wages? So we all hear this thing about 7 million, but what does that actually mean?
Yeah, okay. So for the current season ending in this May 2017, we think the wage bill is going to be around 200 million. Probably would have been a little bit higher, but if we don't make the Champs League, it's going to come back down a bit because there'll be no bonuses to pay out. Man United have sort of grown ahead. They've sort of used this power, irrespective of not being in the Champions League, making disastrous buys, sacking managers. They just keep piling the dough on the table, remorselessly, because they can, because they've got it. So they're out at like 230, 240 million, and arguably not doing that much better than us. The other guys we know are around that 200, 210, 220 million pound bracket, i.e. Chelsea and City. We don't actually know that accurately where Spurs and Liverpool's wage bills are, because they tend to lag their numbers. Now that they're private companies, they don't have to report so frequently. But it's believed to be around that. Spurs, I think, was around 120, somewhere around like that. And obviously they got great capacity to increase it. 2-year regular Champions League income for them, new stadium, almost certainly going to get better sponsorship now. I mean, they're the team to watch. They're the new brand out there. We used to deride them selling their premium seats. Would you rather be watching our fare in the Europa League next year on Thursday nights, or watching Spurs play one of the Madrids?
And the TV deal, the increase in wages, how does that work?
Yeah, so the TV deal, adding about £60 million roughly, probably this year, but you're only allowed to spend like 7 million maybe a year. You can spend more than that if you've got increases in other revenues, i.e. your commercial revenues go up by 10 million, you can spend the 7 plus the 10, you've got more from your commercials coming in. If you've got more Champions League money coming in, you can spend the extra Champions League money and the extra commercial money and the 7 million in increasing your wage bill. If you sell a player for a profit, on top of those three things, you can spend that as well on top.
So just to amplify that point, so every club in the Premier League is going to get substantially more TV money in from a Premier League deal, but all of that can't go on wages. It used to be increases in wages went out to players and agents, and
So
it
you
was
pay
almost,
what you want.
and it almost went down. And the owners have got together and said, "This is madness. We're at a level now where we need to help ourselves." And there is, as Simon talks about, it's called short-term cost control, where they limit what you can spend of that TV money in wage increases. Other revenues can help you spend more, but you can't spend more of that TV money if that's your only capacity increase.
So it's very important to be increasing your commercial deals, your everything else, because otherwise you can't afford to pay 7 players.
And consequently, it's very, very apt to look at what's going on at Everton at the moment because of their ownership. If they can go and get a significant financial sponsor for their training ground at value or whatever, that is revenue increase, which allows them to spend more of their TV money, although money's fungible, of course, on wages, and they have to do deals like that. The fact that sponsorship of the training ground came from Arsenal's 30% shareholder is a moot point, but I think that's a whole different podcast.
So
it's a hobby horse.
if you're getting 50 million from TV money, 7 million's going to wages. What's the rest going on?
Well, it's the profit, isn't it? That's why the profit is £40 million this year and last year.
So it's profit, but effectively it's just sitting there then?
It's not all profit. Every year Arsenal spends something like 10% of investment in their fixed assets. So Hale End has been done. We've done a new pitch. We've got new floodlights coming in. Colney, is there any more to spend there?
Yeah,
they will run out. Spend 10 million a year on those type of capital investment projects to keep your assets up to level is going on, but no way does it even compensate for the new monies coming in. You could have some going on that, some going on wages, but still you're sat with 30 or 40 million of money you effectively can't spend on wages.
But if I mean, we obviously, we self-fund and all that sort of stuff. So if we use 7 million from our TV money on wages, we've used a bit from our commercial. I mean, maybe not us, but other clubs. Can owners put money in? Can you still do that? Can owners put money in to help a club to buy a better player, to pay a player more money? And how do Arsenal work? We all know Arsenal is self-funded, but how does that relate to other clubs?
The way it's happened, and this is pre and post financial fair play, if you look at Chelsea's figures, they have a soft loan, a loan which is not paying interest to their sole owner of over £1 billion. It's just over £1 billion that they owe him in money that he's put in. Not that they're paying interest on it. That's one way. That can't happen now. What we've seen at Manchester City is their sponsorship team via Abu Dhabi. So this is Etihad and Abar and other people who are not household names in the UK have put in financial investment at significant values. You see it happening at Paris Saint-Germain with the Qataris. We're seeing it now at Everton with UFM, who have sponsored the training ground. So an owner just cannot put £100 million on the table and say go and spend it. But there are other ways of getting into the club, making it look like legitimate revenue.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people follow the old Wenger model. They sell players for a profit, and use those profits to like fund wage increases. And yeah, the owner can put money in to fund transfers. That's not the problem. The problem is like funding the wage bill because of the wage cap constraint. So you need other sources of revenue coming in or profits to pay the wages on the player. Yeah, if you go out and buy Griezmann for 100 million, yeah, you've got to sign a contract with him for 200 million.
But let's be realistic. If Arsenal are going to have revenues of this season of 420 million pounds, and we're paying 200 million of wages, please tell me you can't run a top-level football club and need additional on top of that. It's about what you do with the money and how you work it.
Yeah, increasingly, and in a way, this discussion proves it because like everyone's like, oh yeah, but what about being in the Champions League? We're in the Thursday night footy now. It's like, so what?
Doesn't make
so what? You're still going to make a profit. You still got 200 million. You still got 90 million pounds odd to spend on transfers in the summer. And you still got plenty of firepower.
Before we go on to transfers, so I think what a lot of fans are asking each other and talking about is, can we afford to pay Alexis Sanchez and potentially Mesut Ozil 300,000? That's part one of the question. Part two is, if we do that, can we then sign Anton Griezmann on 300,000 as well? Can we do that? In your opinion, obviously.
Yeah. We can certainly afford to pay someone between 10 and 15 million pound a season in wages. But there is a cap, so 10 is 200,000, 15 is 300,000 a week. But to do that, you've got to trim the wage bill elsewhere because of what Simon talks about, the short-term cost control, the new money coming in. The wage bill theoretically should only be going up by 7-ish million. We all know the players who are not contributing to the first team, and we've been able to pay them well, and it's either loyalty payments, it's because it suits them to keep them. They're a good influence around there, but we know they're not contributing to the first team. If you wanted to pay those type of monies, which we can clearly do, and then get an extra transfer in, then we'd have to be a lot more efficient with the existing spend.
So in that that's telling me if we were to re-sign Sanchez and Ozil early in the summer, we'll probably see a player or two go before we get someone in at a big wage. I don't mean at a big wage.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, well, which is kind of slightly logical as well if you think about it. If you decide those are your stars.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, there are plenty of players who could be sold who are on, close to 100,000 a week. That's 5 million a year. We don't have to name the names. And if you can ship
them on the wages. This is why clubs have been running their wage book short. Everyone's saying you've got so many players with only a year left. Shit, Spurs had whatchamacallit, Kane on like only a year because all the clubs are running them short because. If you give them a big deal, you track with them. You can't offload them into Europe. Europe can't afford the wages we can pay now. And we saw it last summer. City jobbing players out, all and sundry, Negredo to Middlesbrough. Now everyone ignores the fact that they spent 30 or 40 million on him. They're paying him an absolute fortune. It's just like, get rid of him. Everyone's except for Man United, who've got so much firepower. Everyone else is jobbing players out. Chelsea selling off Mikel, Oscar. So
that's wages. Now, in terms of transfers, how much money would you estimate Arsenal have got to spend this summer? This is your line. This is everyone's line. Isn't it?
Well, free cash, i.e. cash. Once you allow for money that you need to tide you over the winter months and the phasing of the payments that come in, and allowing for the fact that we won't have will be Thursday night footy hopefully next season. About £90 million, I would say, which is sort of the sort of money that we paid this summer. Do remember, please, 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 always, that you never spend all of your money up front.
Yeah.
You always phase it out over 3 or 4 years if you can. Although this year, Arsenal paid relatively more up front than is usual, and sort of took us a bit surprised when we did our numbers in the autumn. We didn't.
Is that because they're still paying for other players? Though,
No. You take that in for account. I mean, like your Ozils are like staggered over 4 or 5 years, or 4 years normally. But it looks like a big chunk of the money that went on Mustafi and Perez went out up front.
But that's 90 before any receipts. So before any sales, 90 is a reasonable estimate of what could be available.
If you can get any money in on the back. So it's quite easy to see, like, you know, you could go crazy at Arsenal if you got rid of Ozil, Sanchez, Bellerin, and you could go ballistic. You could play fantasy football.
And how do you think that sits with other clubs? I know we're not experts on other clubs, but from conversations and the public accounts for whichever clubs there are.
Sort of money that they have.
Yeah, I mean, where would that? What would other clubs be spending this summer, do you think, if they spent everything they could afford to?
Yeah, Chelsea had a lean year. Next year they've got bigger commercials coming in.
Yeah.
They're going to certainly be able to go up another level on their wage bill. They're back in the Champions League, so they got that. They're going to probably win the league. They got that. You know, they got a royal flush, haven't they, really? So you'd expect them to go big. United go big because they just can, and they will. City are interesting. I mean, they stumbled around a bit because they had players that Pep didn't want, and they couldn't get rid of them because the wages are so high, and they were slightly hemmed in by the rules and the performance. And this year they're like in a fight for fourth, which is nice, and they haven't got anything else. So they might not be able to go too big, but I think they've got Yaya's coming off his deal, isn't he? Yeah, so they've got some big change coming loose in that wage bill anyway. So maybe certainly not as much as the other two. Then it's just like, what were the new boys, Liverpool and Spuds throw at it, if anything? You can't, you know.
One question we had from a member was about so we've kind of heard 90 million for a few years now, haven't we, really? But 90 million 3 years ago, or 3 years ago to 90 million now is a bit of a difference, because 3 years ago we signed Alexis Sanchez for about 35 million. This year we signed Mustafi and Xhaka for the same amount. I can tell you who's probably a better footballer, different positions of course, but you know what I mean. Yeah. So is that 90 million actually, does it take you very far? And how has that value changed over the last few years, and why has it changed?
New influx in revenues, not just in the Premier League. The super clubs in Europe are competing at that same table from commercial revenues, or in the case of Paris, from owner money. Yeah. But if you look at the way transfers have gone and the names of players who used to be big signings at 40 and 50 million, now that's sort of a standard price. If you believe that Griezmann is around about 85 or 90, you saw what Pogba was done for a sort of a slightly attacking defensive midfielder. I'm not saying that's the new benchmark, but any selling club is for a player who's in demand will be looking for those type of monies. Yeah. That takes you away from the 4 players we bought at 90 million-ish in the summer of 16 to 1.5 players in summer of 17 before any transfers, and some of those transfers might not be the choice. The big question will be, Sanchez, clearly in demand, has got 1 year left on his contract. Does the club allow him to stay and play that down to 0, go on a free transfer, or if one of the 4 or 5 suitor clubs put 50 million on the table for him, what do you do? Do you take that money?
It's going to be a footballing decision though, not a financial decision.
And who makes footballing decisions?
The head of football.
the head of football. Okay. History would show we sell players before they run down to 0. We tend not to let players go on free transfers.
Was that for financial reasons, and has things changed from the
No,
numbers?
Van Persie forced his way out with his comment about...
Just forced his way out, just went on strike.
At the time with Fabregas and with Van Persie, could the club have actually got them to stay, lost that 25 million, and it wouldn't have impacted too badly?
We wouldn't have got anything out of them playing-wise because of the players absolutely wanted to go.
Yeah, Berahino, they've done a...
No, but say they had
we
played.
could keep-
But say they had played. They were professional for another season. Financially, how would that have impacted us?
Negligible. We could have carried that for sure.
The year Van Persie was sold.
2011.
Yeah, would we have signed Podolski, Giroud, and Cazorla in the same summer if Van Persie had stayed, or could we not really afford to?
No, some of that money went into new players, so it's a balance. Yeah.
Another question we have had from someone was
Big question though. The one other big issue I think you're looking at is, will clubs have an appetite to pay the big number that everyone now wants? You know, the 35s for the defender, the 50s for the defender, the 80s, because how many of them are working out? Stones. Run through the list of the big signings.
It's the entry price. That's what sellers want. Sellers demand that, and if you want them out of their club,
Sellers might demand that, but if you don't get it...
But that's why someone like Sanchez, where there's 4 or 5 clubs interested, you can, and where Ozil, you possibly wouldn't. So it's about who's in demand.
What I'm trying to say is I don't think so many players will be in demand, and you might see a lot of clubs being wary about spending the big money because a lot of the big money deals aren't paying off for them.
So then the big money players go early, and then you go in once their firepower is...
I mean, how are City feeling about Sterling and Stones at 100 mil?
I bet they're pleased with Stones. That will come okay. Sterling wasn't Pep's buy.
moving on. Debt. That's something we've heard a lot of in the last sort of 10 years. That's certainly since the stadium move, and even before that. Are we in debt? What are we in debt? Is it manageable? What are we doing?
Arsenal have very manageable debts. The current debt is just about £200 million. The club took on £260 million of long-term debt as part of the stadium move.
Long-term, a rough number,
25 to 30 years. It's like a mortgage. So Arsenal were paying a high level of interest on that because they've fixed the rate of interest. At the time, it made sense, certainty, what you're doing. They're paying 5.75, 6% interest on the debt.
And that won't change?
That won't change. They've locked that in. So they've got...
So that was quite wise. That was...
It was prudent at the time to know what you got. So Arsenal's debt repayments, because it's amortising, it's being paid off as we go along, and interest is running at about just under £20 million a year. So the two principal bits of debt, one is on the stadium, and the other is money owed to supporters who paid for debentures when the North Bank was built, the AB bonds, and then when Arsenal ran short on the new stadium finance, they issued some C and D debentures, which raised another £14 million. So the sum owed to supporters in the debentures...
That's quite low scale.
Yep, exactly. So there is debt around 200 million, but very manageable. It would cost to pay it off because of the interest rate protection they've taken. To pay that off would cost an additional £25 million to break the agreements they've to pay that high.
So it's pointless them paying it.
There's better things to be doing with your cash than if you had an influx of 500 million because someone's bought the club, then clearly they would pay it. But there's other things to do with it before we get to debt. I really don't see that the debt for the club is an issue.
Okay, cool. Share prices. So they've obviously gone up. I guess the question here is, if Stan Kroenke was to sell up this summer, how much of a profit would he have made on his shares, and how have shares kind of have changed from when he took over?
You better tell me what the buying price is then. So in round numbers, and let's not forget, anyone who's bought a share in Arsenal, whether it be Usmanov or Kroenke or anyone else, that money has gone to a selling shareholder, and none of the money's coming to the club. Stan Kroenke, over a period of time, and it's just over 10 years since he first bought his shares, April 2007, 2007 were his first purchases. I'm not too sure whether there's been any 10-year commemoration of that, but he in total for his 67% shareholding in Arsenal has paid about £425 million.
Okay.
If he were to sell his total holding now in the club at the current share price, and let's not forget, there's no real share price. There's only 3% of the club available to trade, because 30% owned by Usmanov, 67% by Kroenke. If he were to sell at the current price, he would make something like £200 million on top of his 424. The share price at the moment somewhere about 17.5 or 18,000 pounds a share. If that share price were £21,500, he would double his money.
Wow.
He could get £850 million if the share price was £21.5 million. He won't be selling £21,500. He won't be selling at that level. If someone came in with a massive knockout offer, who knows whether he would consider it.
No. I mean, would Usmanov pay that much? Would that's what people are asking? Would Usmanov come in and pay that, or is he?
He could financially. He could. Whether politically, it's the thing for him to be doing.
Depends what day of the week it is, doesn't it? Really?
Who knows?
It's all speculation, I suppose.
It's all speculation. There's an interesting project going on at Everton, although that's technically not the money of Usmanov. I'm sure Arsenal is still a very attractive prospect to him. It's a true global team, and with some additional care and attention, would be back at that top table.
Okay. And just finally, club level. So we've had a question about club level. The prices have obviously gone up. I mean, the question was about, is it justified? That's quite subjective. Feel free to give your opinion on it. But that sort of, does the club need that increase, I guess is the question. Because when something goes up, you always think, does the club need it?
How much is the increase for club? How much will it raise for Arsenal if they push through the club level increases that are coming through? What's the figure?
I think it was about 3%. I mean, the point is, it's like, okay, so they might raise the thick end of £1 million.
An additional £1 million.
And the profit and the revenue might go up from 420 to 421.
Okay.
Big deal. And basically, it's just about putting them up because they can, because 50%, at least 50% of the seats when we used to have the data, which is about 3 or 4 years ago, were fans, and the other half were people who had the seats to take clients to,
and they'll pay
be entertained on Thursday nights.
3% won't affect them.
It seems to be marginal. I think Sam sums it up. They do because they can.
Well, if you found it useful, obviously do let us know. And if you did find it useful, we'll do more, potentially in the summer and next season and beyond. So thank you for watching, and up the Arsenal, I guess.